My name is Mia. I'm 27, and I've always been the daughter my parents remembered second. The day they told me my brother would inherit everything wasn't just about money, it was confirmation of what I'd felt my entire life. I still remember sitting across from them at that polished oak table, the same table where we'd celebrated birthdays, argued over curfews, and shared holiday meals. Dad cleared his throat while Mom fidgeted with her wedding ring. "We've been thinking about the future," he said. Just 5 simple words that made my stomach drop. I forced a smile, the same one I'd perfected through years of standing in my brother Ethan's shadow. The golden child, the firstborn, the son. "Your brother will inherit the house and the business," Mom said, her voice eerily casual, as if discussing weekend plans rather than my erasure from the family legacy. "It just makes the most sense, honey." I searched their faces for any sign that this was a cruel joke. There was none. Just the calm certainty of parents who believed they were making the most logical choice. The family business that I had poured my heart into for 7 years while Ethan pursued his dreams abroad. The house where I'd cared for them both during Dad's recovery from heart surgery 2 years ago. My throat tightened as Dad slid a document across the table. "We just need your signature to make it official," he said. "It's better to handle these things while we're all still here." That's when I knew. I wasn't just the second choice. I was no choice at all. What happened next changed everything. Not just for me, but for everyone at that table. Because they never expected what I would do with their rejection. They never anticipated my last word would become the first chapter of a story they weren't prepared to read. The pattern established. Looking back now, I should have seen it coming. The signs were there from the beginning, written in memories as vivid as photographs in a family album nobody bothered to show me. When I was 8, my artwork came home from school with a gold star from my teacher. I ran to the refrigerator, eager to see it displayed alongside Ethan's perfect math tests and soccer trophies. Mom took it with a distracted smile, said, "That's nice, sweetie," and tucked it into a drawer. I found it 3 days later, forgotten beneath grocery lists and utility bills. Ethan's achievements were framed, displayed, celebrated. Mine were acknowledged, then quietly filed away. Different standards for different children. A pattern so consistent, it became invisible to everyone but me. The first time I truly understood my place was during Dad's first health scare when I was 16. Ethan was away at a prestigious summer program, something they'd saved for years to afford. The call came at midnight. Dad collapsed at work. Possible heart attack. I was the one who sat in the hospital waiting room for 13 hours straight. I was the one who held Mom's hand when she broke down, who spoke with doctors, who handled insurance forms with trembling teenage fingers. I was the one who made sure our home kept running, that bills were paid, that Mom ate something between her vigils at Dad's bedside. Ethan called once, briefly. "He's tough. He'll pull through," he said, before explaining he couldn't come home. The program was too important for his future. When Dad recovered, my parents praised Ethan's maturity for making the difficult decision to continue his education during the family crisis. No one mentioned the nights I spent sleeping in a hospital chair or the finals I somehow passed despite missing 2 weeks of school. This wasn't about love. I never doubted they loved me. It was about value, about who was worth investing in, about whose future mattered more. As we grew older, the pattern solidified into unspoken family law. Ethan received financial support for college, internships, his first apartment. I worked 3 jobs to put myself through a state school, coming home on weekends to help Mom with the family business's bookkeeping. "You're so good with details," she'd say. "Such a help to us." But never once, "This should be yours someday." I became the family's emotional foundation, the one who mediated arguments, who remembered birthdays, who checked in when someone was having a bad day. I gave and gave, believing that somehow this invisible labor would eventually be seen. That one day, they'd realize my worth wasn't measured in grades or trophies, but in the steady commitment I showed every single day. I was wrong. Some patterns are too deeply etched to break, until something shatters them completely. The breaking point. The inheritance conversation happened on a Sunday. By Tuesday morning, I couldn't recognize my own reflection. Dark circles shadowed my eyes from 2 sleepless nights spent replaying every family memory, searching for where I'd failed to prove my worth. I went through the motions that week, showing up at the family business, smiling at customers, pretending my world hadn't collapsed. Dad acted as if nothing had changed, discussing upcoming orders with me, asking my opinion on suppliers. The cruel irony wasn't lost on me. My insights were valuable enough to build the business, but not enough to inherit it. 5 days after the announcement, Mom invited me for dinner. "Just us girls," she said, her voice overly bright. I agreed, hoping for some explanation, some acknowledgement of what they'd done. Instead, she spent the evening showing me wedding venues she'd bookmarked for Ethan and his girlfriend. "They're not even engaged yet," she laughed. "But a mother knows these things." I nodded, pushed food around my plate, and wondered if she knew anything about me at all. "Have you thought about what you'll do next?" she asked suddenly. "What do you mean?" My voice sounded distant, even to myself. "Well, with the business going to Ethan eventually, I thought maybe you'd want to explore other options. You've always been so adaptable." Adaptable. The word hung between us. What she meant was dispensable. "I'll figure something out," I said. "I always do." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "That's my girl. So practical." I left her house with a clarity I'd never felt before. This wasn't just about an inheritance. This was about a lifetime of being valued only for what I could give, never for who I was. 2 days later, while searching for some tax documents in Dad's home office, another task that always fell to me, I found it. A letter, yellowed with age, tucked inside an old accounting ledger. My grandfather's handwriting, addressed to my father. "Remember, son," it read, "a family business is more than money and property. It's a legacy of values. Look beyond the obvious heir to the one who embodies the heart of what we've built. Sometimes the quietest dedication speaks the loudest about who should carry your work forward." My grandfather had died before I was born. This letter was written when my father was young, likely before he had children of his own. But the words pierced through decades, speaking directly to my situation with uncanny precision. I sat on the floor of the office, letter in hand, as something inside me broke and reformed. My grandfather had seen what my parents couldn't. That inheritance wasn't about gender or birth order or who shouted loudest. It was about who carried the true spirit of the family. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. Not out of spite, not out of resentment, but out of the sudden, crystal-clear understanding that I deserved more than to be someone else's afterthought. I would no longer wait for them to see my value. I would show them. The silent decision. I didn't make a scene. There was no dramatic confrontation, no tearful accusations. Instead, I acted with the same quiet efficiency that had defined my entire relationship with my family. First, I found an apartment across town. Small, but mine. I moved out on a Wednesday while everyone was at work. No goodbye note, no forwarding address, just empty drawers and vacant shelves where my life had been. My phone buzzed constantly that first night. Mom, Dad, even Ethan. I watched their names flash on my screen, but didn't answer. For once, they would feel what it was like to be unacknowledged. I had savings, not much, but enough for 3 months' rent. Every penny I'd ever earned had been carefully tucked away, a habit born from knowing early that no safety net awaited me. The hardest part was walking away from the family business. I'd spent 7 years learning every aspect of it, from inventory management to client relationships, to the specialized techniques that had made our custom furniture sought after across 3 states. I knew that operation better than anyone, including my father, including Ethan, who had worked there a total of 6 summer breaks. But leaving was necessary. I couldn't build something new while clinging to the place that had shown me my limitations. 2 weeks after moving out, I was having coffee at a small cafe when a woman approached my table. Eleanor Reeves. I recognized her immediately as one of our most particular clients at the family business. She'd ordered a custom library last year, and I'd been the one to design it, though my father took the credit during the installation. "I thought that was you," she said, sitting down without invitation. I've been trying to reach your father's company for a week. No one seems to know how to handle my new project. I smiled politely. I'm sorry to hear that, but I no longer work there. She studied me with sharp eyes. You designed my library, didn't you? Not your father. The question caught me off guard. How did you know? Because when I mentioned specific details about the design to him, he had no idea what I was talking about. But you knew exactly what I wanted before I could even articulate it. She placed a business card on the table. I'm not just a client. I own Reeves Design Collective. We're always looking for talent that understands both craftsmanship and client vision. Call me when you're ready to be appreciated. That conversation became the first thread in a new pattern. Eleanor saw what my family never had, that my quiet dedication wasn't weakness, but strength. Under her mentorship, I began freelancing, designing custom pieces that combined traditional craftsmanship with modern aesthetics. I discovered that my years of emotional labor had given me an uncanny ability to read people, to understand what they wanted even when they struggled to express it. This became my business edge, not just creating beautiful objects, but creating pieces that told my clients' stories. The first 6 months were brutal. I worked 18-hour days, took on projects at razor-thin margins to build my portfolio, and learned the hard way about pricing, contracts, and setting boundaries. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, questioning everything. Nights I nearly called home, nearly gave up. But each morning, I remembered my grandfather's letter. The quietest dedication speaks the loudest. I wasn't building furniture anymore. I was building proof. My parents tried to find me, of course. They left messages that evolved from confused to angry to concerned. After 3 months, Ethan showed up at my apartment. Apparently, he'd hired someone to track me down. "This is ridiculous, Mia," he said, standing awkwardly in my tiny living space that doubled as my workshop. "Mom and Dad are worried sick. Just come home and talk to them." I looked at my brother, really looked at him, and realized something surprising. He wasn't the villain in this story. He was just a man who had never questioned the advantages he'd been given. "I'm not coming back, Ethan. Not until I'm ready." "Ready for what?" he asked, genuinely confused. I gestured around the apartment, at the sketches covering my walls, the prototypes taking shape in corners. Ready to be seen. Building from zero. 8 months after walking away from my family, I received an email that changed everything. The subject line read, "Commission request, Vance Media headquarters." Vance Media was a major digital publishing company that had recently relocated their main office to our city. The email detailed their search for a designer to create a signature reception desk and conference table that would embody their brand values, innovation rooted in tradition. My hands trembled as I read it. This wasn't just any opportunity. It was the kind that established careers, the kind that created legacies. The email had come through Eleanor's recommendation. "I told them you were the only one who could give them what they wanted," she said when I called her. "Don't prove me wrong." I worked for 3 weeks straight on the proposal, sleeping only when my vision blurred too much to continue. When I finally presented my designs to Vance's executive team, I wore the only professional outfit I owned and spoke with a confidence I didn't entirely feel. "We've seen 12 proposals," their CEO said afterward. "Yours is the only one that understood we're not looking for furniture. We're looking for a statement." They commissioned not just the reception desk and conference table, but complete furnishings for their executive floor. The contract would sustain my business for a year. That night, I allowed myself a moment of pure joy. One massive client wouldn't build a sustainable business, but it was validation. Proof that my vision had value, that I had value. The Vance project consumed the next 5 months of my life. I hired 2 craftspeople to help, former colleagues from my father's business who had reached out after hearing I'd gone solo. Together, we transformed my designs from renderings to reality, solving problems and refining techniques along the way. The work was exhilarating but punishing. Twice I nearly missed deadlines due to supplier issues. Once, an entire table had to be rebuilt after a critical flaw emerged in the final stages. My savings dwindled to nothing as I reinvested everything into completing the project perfectly. On the night before the installation, I stood in the workshop space I'd managed to lease, surrounded by the finished pieces. For the first time in my life, I saw my name, literally carved into the discreet maker's mark on each piece. Not my father's name, not the family business, mine. The installation at Vance Media went flawlessly. As we positioned the massive conference table, a sweeping curve of walnut and brushed steel that seemed to float despite its weight, the CEO ran his hand along its surface. "This exceeds everything we hoped for," he said. "We're hosting a media event next week to showcase our new headquarters. Would you be comfortable with us featuring your work? There will be press coverage." 1 week later, my designs appeared in architectural magazines, design blogs, and business publications. My phone began ringing with new inquiries. My website traffic increased by 4,000% overnight. A furniture design influencer with millions of followers shared images of the Vance headquarters, specifically highlighting my work. "This isn't just furniture," she wrote. "This is functional art that tells a story. Remember this name. You'll be seeing it everywhere soon." The post went viral. 3 months later, I had to move to a larger workshop. 6 months after that, I hired 4 more craftspeople. 1 year after the Vance installation, I had a waiting list of clients and had been featured in every major design publication in the country. The morning I realized I'd officially made more money in 1 month than the family business typically made in a quarter, I sat alone in my office and wept. Not from pride, though there was plenty of that. Not from exhaustion, though that had become my constant companion. I wept because for the first time, I understood that walking away hadn't been about proving something to my parents. It had been about proving something to myself, that I was never the second choice. I was simply in the wrong story. And then, as if the universe had been waiting for this exact moment of realization, my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in nearly 2 years. "Home, the reunion. Have you seen it?" Ethan's voice crackled through the phone, the first words from my family in almost 2 years. "Seen what?" I asked, though I suspected I knew. "You're in Forbes. Dad saw it this morning." The profile had been published that week, a feature on disruptors in traditional industries. They'd photographed me in my workshop, sleeves rolled up, surrounded by the materials and tools that had become my second language. "How are they?" I asked, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "They miss you," he said simply. "We all do. Come to dinner on Sunday." I agreed, not out of obligation or hope for reconciliation, but because I was finally ready to face them as my full self, not as the daughter seeking approval, but as the woman who no longer needed it. The drive to my parents' house felt surreal. Same tree-lined street, same mailbox with the fading red flag, same porch where I'd sat countless evenings, invisible in plain sight. Dad opened the door before I could knock. He'd aged, new lines etched around his eyes, his hair more silver than brown now. He started to reach for me, then hesitated, as if unsure of his welcome. "Mia," he said, my name carrying the weight of everything unspoken between us. Mom appeared behind him, hands clutching a dish towel. "You cut your hair," she said, and then burst into tears. Dinner was a strange performance of normalcy. They asked careful questions about my business, nodding with exaggerated interest at my responses. I answered politely, maintaining the emotional distance I'd cultivated over the past 2 years. It was Ethan who finally shattered the pretense. "This is ridiculous," he said, dropping his fork with a clatter. "We're all acting like we're at a business meeting. Mia, you disappeared for 2 years. No calls, no visits. Do you have any idea what that did to them? To all of us?" I met my brother's gaze. "Do you have any idea what it did to me when they told me I wasn't worth including in the family legacy?" The table fell silent. "That's not what we meant," Mom whispered. "What did you mean then?" I asked. The question I'd waited 2 years to voice. Dad cleared his throat. "We thought we were doing what was best. The business? It's demanding. We wanted to spare you that burden." "Spare me?" I repeated. "I worked in that business for 7 years. I managed the books, the clients, the orders. I designed pieces you took credit for, and you thought you were sparing me by giving everything to Ethan, who spent a total of maybe 6 months actually working there?" Ethan shifted uncomfortably. I never asked for it, Mia. For what it's worth, I told them it should be yours. This revelation hit me like a physical blow. You did? He nodded. The day after you left, I told them they'd made a mistake. But you were gone, and they were too proud to admit it, and then time just passed. Mom reached across the table toward me, stopping just short of touching my hand. We thought the business was all we had to give. We never imagined you would build something so much bigger on your own. We were wrong, Mia, Dad added, his voice rough with emotion. Seeing what you've created, the Forbes article, we're so proud of you. Proud now, I said. When there's external validation, when strangers have confirmed my worth, the painful truth hung in the air between us. We'd like to make it right, Dad said finally. We've been talking and we want to change the inheritance plan. Split everything equally between you and Ethan. I looked around the table, at my father's hopeful expression, my mother's tearful one, my brother's supportive nod, and felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. They were offering me what I'd once desperately wanted, what I'd believed would prove my value, but I no longer needed their proof. I appreciate that, I said carefully, but I need you to understand something. I didn't build my company to spite you or to prove you wrong. I built it because for the first time in my life, I could see myself clearly without the shadow of your expectations. I took a deep breath. I don't want half the family business. I don't want the house. What I want, what I've always wanted, was for you to see me. Not as an afterthought, not as the practical, reliable daughter who picks up the slack, but as someone with dreams and value of my own. Mom was openly crying now. Dad stared down at his plate. I think, I said, rising from the table, that this dinner was a good first step, but we have a long way to go. As I turned to leave, Dad called after me. Will we see you again? I paused at the doorway, looking back at the family I'd spent a lifetime trying to please. That depends, I said, on whether you're ready to know who I really am, not just what I can do for you. My last word. 3 months after that tense family dinner, I received a formal letter from my parents' lawyer. Inside was a revised estate plan, splitting all assets equally between Ethan and me, along with a handwritten note from my father. No legal document can undo our mistakes, but we hope this shows we're trying. I placed the papers in my desk drawer without responding. This wasn't about money or property anymore. This was about a fundamental understanding that couldn't be fixed with signatures on legal documents. For weeks, I considered my next move. My company was thriving. I had opened a second workshop in a neighboring city. My designs had been acquired by 2 museums for their permanent collections. By all external measures, I had succeeded beyond what anyone, including myself, could have imagined. But there remained an unfinished chapter with my family. Not for their sake, but for mine. I called my father on a Tuesday morning. I'd like to come by this weekend, I said. There's something I need to say to you both. That Saturday, I drove to my parents' house with a purpose that felt almost ceremonial. I had dressed carefully, not in the casual clothes they were accustomed to seeing me in, nor in the polished business attire from my media appearances, but in a simple dress I had designed and sewn myself years ago, before I'd found my true calling in furniture. They were waiting in the living room, perched anxiously on the edge of the sofa. Ethan had chosen not to be there. "This is between you and them," he'd said when I told him of my plans. I didn't sit. Instead, I placed a small wooden box on the coffee table between us. My father glanced at it questioningly. "I made this last week," I said. The box was simple but elegant, crafted from the same walnut we'd used in the family business for generations. It's the last thing I'll ever make with wood from our family's original supplier. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. "You're not quitting woodworking, are you?" "No," I said, "but I'm closing a chapter." I took a deep breath and began the speech I'd carefully prepared. For 27 years, I believed that my worth was determined by your recognition of it. I shaped myself around what I thought you wanted: the reliable daughter, the silent partner, the emotional caretaker. I gave and gave, hoping that eventually you would see me as deserving of the same investment you so readily gave Ethan. My father started to speak, but I held up my hand. "Please let me finish." This isn't about blame anymore. It's about truth. I gestured to the box on the table. Inside that box is my grandfather's letter, the one where he advised you to look beyond the obvious heir to the one who embodies the heart of what you've built. I found it 2 years ago, the week after you told me about the inheritance. My father's face paled. Where did you? In your office, in the old ledger. I paused. Did you ever read it? He nodded slowly. Many times, when I was younger. But you forgot the message. Mia, my mother interjected, we've apologized. We've changed the will. What more can we do? I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not just my mother, but a woman who had navigated her own complex relationship with worth and recognition. This isn't about what you can do now, I said gently. It's about understanding what happened. You didn't exclude me from the inheritance because you loved me less or valued me less. You did it because you never truly saw me at all. You saw what I could do for you, for the family, for the business. But you never saw what I could become on my own. I opened the box and removed the letter, placing it on the table. I'm not returning this to make you feel guilty. I'm returning it because I don't need it anymore. It served its purpose. It woke me up, made me realize that waiting for other people to determine my worth was a losing game I'd been playing my entire life. I moved toward the door, then turned back to face them one last time. The inheritance doesn't matter to me anymore. Keep it. Change it. Do whatever feels right to you. But know this. The greatest gift you unintentionally gave me was the push to create my own legacy, one that can never be taken away or handed to someone else. My father stood, his eyes glistening. What happens now, Mia? I smiled, a real smile, perhaps the first genuine one I'd directed at my parents in years. Now you get to decide what kind of relationship you want with the daughter you have, not the daughter you thought I was. And I get to decide whether that relationship serves the woman I've become. And what about us? My mother asked, her voice small. Do we still have a place in your life? I paused at the threshold, feeling the weight of this pivotal moment. That depends on whether you're ready to truly see me. Not as your backup plan or your safety net or your equal heir, but as Mia, complete on my own terms. And then I said the word that would forever mark the transition between my old life and the new one I'd built from nothing. Watch. Not a request. Not a plea. A statement of irrefutable fact. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can say to people who have overlooked you is simply, pay attention. I am not what you thought I was. I am more than you ever imagined. And I am just getting started. That was 3 years ago. The single word I left my parents with, watch, became both a challenge and an invitation. A challenge to see me clearly for perhaps the first time. An invitation to witness the woman I had become without their validation. They accepted both, in their own way, at their own pace. My relationship with my family now exists in a new reality, one where I no longer orbit around their expectations. We have dinner once a month. They visit my showroom when I unveil new collections. We talk about real things now, not just surface pleasantries. The conversations aren't always easy, but they're honest in a way they never were before. My father called me last year after seeing an article about my work in Architectural Digest. I finally understand what you meant, he said. About watching. I see you now, Mia. I'm sorry it took me so long. My mother has found her own voice in surprising ways. Inspired by my journey, she started painting again, a passion she'd abandoned in her 20s to support Dad's business. She's not trying to be a professional artist, but she's creating for herself, and there's a lightness to her that I never saw in my childhood. Ethan and I have forged a relationship independent of our parents. He left the family business 2 years ago to pursue environmental law. His true calling, it turns out. You showed me it was possible to break the script, he told me. To choose your own path even when it disappoints people who love you. The family business continues under the management of my father's longtime assistant, who always saw its potential more clearly than anyone else. I consult occasionally on design matters, but my focus remains on my own company, which now employs 27 people and has expanded into architectural elements beyond furniture. But the most unexpected outcome of my journey has been the community it created. After a profile of my work mentioned the family dynamics that led to my independent path, I began receiving messages from people with similar stories. Sons and daughters who felt invisible in their own families. Creative spirits stifled by practical expectations. People searching for validation in all the wrong places. I started a mentorship program for young designers from overlooked backgrounds. Twice a year, I host workshops where participants not only learn technical skills, but also how to recognize and honor their unique vision when the world seems determined to ignore it. Last month, one of my first mentees launched her own studio. At her opening exhibition, she thanked me for showing her that being underestimated can be a superpower. I recognized in her eyes the same fire that had fueled my own transformation. This is the true inheritance I've created. Not a business or property or bank accounts, but a legacy of self-determination that ripples outward, touching lives I'll never even know. I've learned that inheritance isn't just what's passed down to you. It's what you choose to carry forward and what you decide to leave behind. I left behind the need for external validation. I left behind the belief that my worth was dependent on others' recognition. I left behind the daughter who remained silent when she should have spoken. And I carried forward my grandfather's wisdom about quiet dedication. I carried forward my hard-won knowledge that sometimes rejection is redirection. I carried forward the understanding that the most meaningful legacy is the one you build yourself, stone by stone, choice by choice, day by day. To those of you watching who feel unseen in your own families, who suspect your worth has been miscalculated by the people who should value you most, I want you to hear this. You don't need anyone's permission to claim your value. You don't need to wait for someone else to recognize your potential. And you certainly don't need to inherit a legacy when you're capable of building your own. Your last word doesn't have to be goodbye. It can be watch. It can be witness. It can be the beginning of a story no one saw coming, especially not the people who thought they knew exactly who you were and what you deserved. Sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't what's given to you. It's what you give yourself when you finally stop waiting to be chosen.